Hey y'all, how y'all doing? Shout out to my members. If you haven't got your membership, please get it, y'all. Please get your membership, okay? And I would like to thank those who do have a membership. If you subscribe to the channel, please get your membership. Thank you, subscribers and the viewers who watches the channel. Thank you for hitting that up button, that thumb up button. Thank you very much. Y'all, these are my opinion and not necessarily facts. And the purpose of this video is to educate y'all. Criticism come any purposes, y'all. This is about YNW Melly and why is he cooked in the murder of JUVY and Fat Chaser, which is his friend. The video you're about to watch is going to be the prosecutor laying out why YNW Melly underlies his friends. Not one, but both childhood friends, allegedly. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to take y'all we're going to recap. By the way, I'm going to put recap up here, okay? We're going to recap, okay? Got to recap. Okay? That's what I say. And I want y'all to know that your opinion about this video is your opinion. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the show. testimony agree with the other testimony or evidence in the case? Counsel wants you to look at each piece of evidence individually. The problem is, it's not an individual picture. It's the totality of the circumstances. Because if you look at each individual piece of evidence, what are the odds? Ask that question. What are the odds that Mr. Devins got into that backseat? That all the fatal shots came from that backseat? That they didn't go to his friend's house, Frito Bang? You saw the picture. It's stage 62 they're hanging out. What are the odds that each and every single piece of evidence is stacked up trying to implicate him? And let's be very clear. Tax on Detective Moretti on that. Asking he's trying to better himself or further himself. Detective Moretti testified as a detective in the homicide bureau today, just as he was 5 years ago when this case occurred. To say that a man who spent 20 years in armed services, protection and furtherance of his country, cares about publicity. There was no impeachment. There was no articles or news things on that. No, Detective Moretti is here fighting on behalf of Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams, the two young men, kids, that were murdered. And let's be clear. Calling someone a kid, anything like that, is a play on your sympathy. And ladies and gentlemen, you agreed when we sat down for jury selection that sympathy would not come into play. That you would look and base this on the facts and the evidence. And ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, you have that. Let's talk about some of the suspects quickly. First of all, they bring up that Danny Polo mentions that and taught you that what says on a plate. So let's be clear, Danny Polo's good to tell you and teach you that term, but when he says fire, you're not supposed to believe him. Which is it? You either believe or disbelieve. Danny Polo is the detective with tons of experience in this particular area. He talked about listening to wiretaps, reading all of these communications. They were talking about that. It's very clear in the context. But so then let's look at that on the plate comment. When did that happen in those messages? February 6th of 2019. So not anywhere near the date incident. Again, another red herring to try and say, oh, this doesn't fit. And ladies and gentlemen, having a motive does not equal guilt.
Our tax experts keep more money in your business.
The simplest explanation that makes the most sense, that takes the fewest leaps, is that this defendant killed these two individuals. The why? Don't have to prove that, but I've given you options, and the evidence is given you options. So, with regards to Mr. Glass, counsel talks about him. If Mr. Demons is at the house All right, y'all. I still have YNW Melly as suspect in the murder of JUVY and Sanchez. Now, the truth will reveal, but Melly is cooked in the murder of JUVY and Sat Chaser, allegedly. Allegedly, he is my suspect. And he will be charged for the murder of JUVY and Sat Chaser. Thanks for watching.